buddy, old pal, Brakken. It's good to have you back.
It's good to be back. I'm happy to be back home.
You know, it's been 2 full weeks, I believe, since we've recorded together.
Yeah, I believe so.
So tell the folks listening what you've been up to the last, we'll call it 10 days anyways, at least. What did you have going on? What were you doing?
We went out west. So we have pulled back on Lisa's whole family on that side. There are 9 grandkids, and they're all kind of clumped in age to where they all get along and can play together. Well, that's the side of the family we do a lot of camping with, but kids are getting to the age where they're in sports and activities and pulled in many different directions. So we pulled back on that this year and instead we have one big camping trip planned for this summer, and that was it. So it was out, we did Mount Rushmore. So we were out in South Dakota. So we drove out, camped there, drove back a day or two early so we could get back because Braden had a double race weekend this weekend. So a lot of driving, a lot of nature, a lot of heat, and then karting.
We did get the heat here in the Midwest. It finally struck us with 90s and all of that.
We got over 100 out there.
Yeah, I believe it. So before you left, I said, okay, whatever, go look at Mount Rushmore. Put a quarter in the telescope to go look at it. I think they still have those little jobby things. You can look at it with binoculars that are cemented to the, I don't know, deck we'll call it. Do they still have those?
I don't know. Oh. I have one regret, Kirk, and I didn't get to do the thing you told me to do, which was run the back of Mount Rushmore.
That's what I'm asking. Did you get some trails in at least?
Yeah, I did. So I ran, and we'll get to this in the episode, but I was able to run mountains every other day because of legs getting trashed from descending. And I saved my biggest run for the day we departed to come back. I did the same thing going out there. Did a big workout, then we left, so I wouldn't feel bad just driving all day and then getting to the hotel and crashing and not trying to fit in a workout that night. So I saved a big workout for the end. From the campsite, we were on trails 5 to 6 miles to Mount Rushmore's backside trails. So run there, do all that, and then run back. And then last minute, we decided to straight shot back so that we could get back in time to work on the cart because there were some things that needed to be done, especially with the temperature change, with air density and humidity, like that. The carburetor and the engine just run different, and I'm not adept at this, and I was gonna have to mess with things that I couldn't get done a race morning. So anyway, we ended up leaving early, and I didn't have enough time. Because we were in mountain lion country, I didn't want to run until I had more sun up on the trails. I didn't want to do a headlamp out there. It's too remote. Bears are one thing. Mountain lions scare me way more than bears.
We just had a nice chat about that. The old animals in the woods.
We did.
I think I got 3 or 4 messages after talking to TJ about bear attacks, telling me I was an idiot and that I need to be careful at all times. Because I said I don't really carry protection with me anymore. And the running public cares about me because they, in their own way, told me I'm an idiot, but it's out of love, I believe. So, okay. Any other updates?
I don't think so. When I was out there, though, because you're running through big game territory, we actually weren't in bear country, allegedly, but a lot of mountain lion.
Yeah.
And it was just a great reminder that because I was running with a waist belt on and I had water back there and then water in my hands, because again, the days were 92, 96, 100, and the day we left, it got to 104. So they were hot, so I had a bottle or two with me at all times. And just the fumbling of the bottle out of the back of the belt versus having it in your hands was a great reminder that if you have a knife or a gun or bear spray or something, if it's not in your hands, the way the trails work, you're not getting it out in time. You're just not. So carrying it is one thing, but it's almost useless unless it's in your hands as the attack starts.
Yeah, I think to really center yourself, you'd need minimum 3, but most likely 5 seconds to process what's happening, to be able to grab the spray on your hip and get it pointed in the right direction. And how often are you really going to have that? It's going to be the flash of a, second, probably blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So you're right. Yeah. All right. Well, training. You said it's what leads us into our conversation today. I think just some things that you sort of have learned because you're ramping your training back up. Things have been going relatively well. You've been building some momentum, as I understand. What has been brought to light, we will say, on the training front recently for you?
Yeah, the overall theme of this is that I have retained enough fitness and done enough training over the course of my adult life, and I have completed enough training sessions in this current block that I can do just about anything. I can execute speed, climbing, descending, compromise running, strength work, any of that type of thing, but it all wrecks me. Like I have enough acumen or skill or just time on feet to do these things, but I can't get my maximum fitness out of any workout or test or if it were a race because I get too beat up by it still. And the concept that there is a resistance to impact needed for any specific form of running or fitness that is every bit as important as your fitness. Like being out in South Dakota, I couldn't use all my fitness in my runs because eventually the downhills trash me too much.
Right.
And you're fighting dead legs more than, and we were at altitude, not high altitude, but campground was 4,600. I topped out at about 7,000 on the runs. And the lungs weren't the limiter. It was still the quads getting beat up on descents. So just that idea that to pivot to things and race well requires a certain baseline of impact resistance, not just engine or skill.
Yeah, structurally, you're breaking down faster than you are aerobically, we will call it. It's not like you're breathing so heavy and can't catch your breath that you must slow down. It is the legs begin to get thrashed and really can't function at their full capacity anymore. It's like the chicken and the egg, right? And I actually think the position you're talking about is an interesting one because it's the second tier of endurance training. You get a deconditioned athlete or somebody coming back from injury and they let it go, or somebody who just isn't that great a shape. Their aerobic system is going to be their limiter and probably give out on them first before like things truly structurally break down. You're never going to find out how bad your hips hurt in a mountain descent because you can't even access it, right? It's just like your aerobic capacity is your limiter. And then once you build up that foundation and everything is smooth, you graduate on to, okay, I can sustain high output. And even your breathing may be under control. Your heart rate may be chill, but your legs just don't work anymore. They don't go anymore, or at least they take so much damage from what you've done that then you're useless for 3 days afterwards. And that's sort of you you're doing things well and you're doing things right when you can get to that point, but then it's like, okay, what do you do about that point? The structural breakdown, right? You following me?
Absolutely. And it's a good, like you said, it's kind of a good place to be in.
It is.
Knowing that I'm capable of doing things, but I still have to get my body used to doing them. And this right here is, I think I'm paying right now for doing a lot of my, not a lot, the vast majority of my quality work, 2 out of every 3 are on the treadmill, which I believe is fine if you're also getting the long run outdoor and a couple of runs here or there. But I'm getting about 1 outdoor run per week.
And why is that?
That's not enough to keep up with the engine building.
You must not have heard me. I said, and why is that? Why are you on the treadmill so much?
Because when I was coming back from reintroducing training and from the MCL, I was having that, for lack of better terms, post-COVID inflammation ramp up I had, where I would just get so crazy sore and inflamed after hitting the ground that I tried to hit the ground as little as possible until my body got used to just working more. So I started with work and then added intensity, and now I'm adding an impact. And so I'm a little bit more extreme than a lot of people, but we see this with road runners who tried mountain races. or mountain racers who try road races, or people go to the track for the first time. People jump on the track and they run a mile race or a 5K, and they all say the same thing. I can't believe how much I beat up my calves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was afraid I was going to cramp in a 5-minute race by the end. And every time people switch terrains, they get that initial shock of, wow, I couldn't quite do my thing towards the end because I was so beat up. And I'd like to chat a little bit about what we think are the minimum effective doses of what kind of impacts you need if you have certain aspirations of switching competition types throughout the year.
That's why I think when I found Spartan racing, which really is trail racing, extreme trail racing, right? Junky terrain, very steep, gnarly stuff. It propelled me on all fronts. My flat running got better. Clearly my mountain running and resistance to impact got better. And it was all because I think I became more durable. Like my structure didn't break down as quickly. Whether my top end VO2 max or whatever you want to call it, my lactate threshold didn't go anywhere, let's just say, but structurally in my training, going to the ski hill up and down, we put 100 pounds of sand on our back and power hiked up the ski hill and then scuttled down. You know, the kind of damage those workouts took. And then I would go to the roads and jump in like a random 10-mile race or something. Be like, my legs just aren't getting tired. Like they're not breaking down. And it was because the stimulus was overtrained. I didn't need all that descending and impact. And then I go run flat and be like, why am I floating today? And why are my hammies holding up? And why do I not feel that dead leg syndrome towards the end of a race? And I think it was because the stimulus was overtrained. And I learned that valuable lesson, like finding a way to damage your legs in training, really no matter how it happens, is going to like bulletproof your longevity once you are racing, so to speak. And that was my first taste of that, because otherwise I'd only, and I say only in quotes, like I only went out on the roads and ran, or I went on flat trail and ran, or, you know, and so I learned that lesson pretty hard, and it bled into everything else. So my question for you, following that up then, is you haven't been on trail a ton. You haven't been descending a ton. A little bit, though. I know you have. So describe...
About once a week I've been descending.
Okay. So describe what you'd been
10
feeling.
days, maybe.
More specifically. We got a question. I don't know if you listened, and I'll just preface it with this. If you listened to the episode I did without you or on Friday, we got a question from Scott Lurg saying he's out in San Luis Obispo now, and my take was like he's doing recovery runs in the mountains and he's doing everything out there, and now he's finding himself pretty damaged, and then maybe less available for his quality days. And so I bring it up. You didn't get a chance to answer that question because you were gone, but you kind of are doing the same thing. So a long way of asking you like what you were feeling specifically.
Well, first to respond to that one, that's how my Colorado experience was. When I moved out to the mountains, I didn't have quality accessible to me early. I tried at first. I was going to the track, and I quickly realized I can't do both. I can't serve both pain masters right now. I'm too beat up. So I decided to put in a month of volume first. Okay. And I kind of treated it like I was a cyclist. I'm going out to run, and I'm going to run easy to moderately hard many days of the week. I just allowed easy runs to progress throughout and like kind of sit in that grindy spot where you're not anaerobic, but you're not fully aerobic. Like that gray zone. I did a lot of second half of runs in gray zone for like 2 to 3 weeks. As I just built volume up, I decided I'm not going to try to hit quality, but I'm going to take all the impact I can. And whenever I feel like picking it up on runs, I will. That's what I did. So I did right away. I did 2 weeks of 60 and then 2 weeks of 70 when I got out there, miles per week, and not a single scripted workout, just to get through that point. And after a month, I could start to handle just that daily grind of getting down the mountain. Just became more manageable, and then I could start adding in some quality work. So Scott, I identify with that. It's tricky.
So you think?
And luckily, I was able to do it during an off season.
So you think in that situation, so my advice, you must not have listened, which is totally fine, is my advice was, even though you're loving the mountains, which, you know, there's mountain envy on my end, depending on where you're at, like maybe we don't go chase vert on recovery days and we just try to keep it more similar to terrain you're used to previously, but at the same time, then you're not taking full advantage of the mountains out there, right? So it's a tricky spot. And then you had altitude acclimation to consider, which a month goes such a long ways if you're not used to it. So you had a lot of factors where in slow there isn't quite as much on the altitude front. But so back to how you were feeling.
Well, along with that, you're right. I did probably 40 to 50% of my volume in Black Forest when I was out there, which is out where VJ is.
Yeah.
And it's rolling very soft trails. So I would alternate runs. I didn't do mountain runs back-to-back days or back-to-back runs. I couldn't. Whenever I was beat up, I just hit the soft dirt pine needle trails. And then the next run I'd go and I'd get some vert. So I did have to hold myself back from just living on the mountain every day.
Speaking of VJ Jones and gossip corner here, I got a lot of respect for VJ Jones. I saw a post or a story about him hanging up his hat for the athlete life last week. It might have been a story. VJ, I would love to know what's going on with you. A lot of golf in your life, VJ, if you still listen. Maybe you don't because you're not doing the running thing or pursuing it, but we'd love to chat with you, VJ. I'd love to hear what's going on with him because I think he's going through a bit of a metamorphosis. OCR world champ, Spartan series champ, said something about hanging up the hat of his athlete life. So I'm just very curious to talk that out because there's seasons of life, and I preach that to no end, and maybe his season of life is golf. But you don't know anything I don't know? I'm sure a lot of people are at home wondering this.
No, I mean, I've been out west.
All right. Well, either way,
I'm more removed from social media than usual.
I'm rooting for you, VJ. Either way. All right. So, talking about how you feel. Let's talk about our feelings structurally, physically, not our emotional feelings, Brakken. That's separate from training. We can't let our emotional feelings cloud our training, folks. That's what amateurs do. We're talking about our structural feelings here. So, tell me, Brakken.
That's right.
Structurally, what are we feeling?
Well, so feeling wise, it's just that every time I do something different, and I think a lot of people have this, when you pivot to it, a new area talks to you. So for example, I did a pretty hard 5K tempo on flat terrain last week before heading out on the drive. And right away, hip flexors and IT band area was barking at me. Because I was lifting my legs up and extending them out and impacting the ground differently than I had been at that pace.
Okay.
And for sure, the last mile, I was fatiguing at insertion points. Like back a hamstring, even not insertion point, but like a hinge point in my hip area. I was having to work to get my legs up and drive well. Because my speed work has been done at 6% on the treadmill. And it's not the same. And then we go out and and I've been running some hill work, but it's my local ski hill. And so when I open up my stride, it's really only at the bottom and I get like 30 meters of fast, hard striding. The rest is that like gallop hop striding, which is different. And so the only times I've impacted the ground hard with an open stride are for 30-meter stretches of steep downhill. And then so getting out to South Dakota, I could pick my way through things pretty quickly. It took a run to get my eyes back, it felt like, on the trail. As I fatigued, I started tweaking and rolling my ankles, which is a little bit more rare for me. And then the rest of the week I didn't, but it was like I was rusty there. But then I just had this deep quad ache from that run that I haven't been getting. And each type of that, switching road to trail, trail to road, steep to semi-steep, uphill to flat, are exposing little areas that just haven't felt like they've been pounded into submission yet.
What shoes were you wearing?
I took out the Speed Goats and the Tecton X's.
Okay. So they both have enough underfoot, I mean, compared to some.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't the issue.
Yeah, the reason I ask, and so I've been actually waffling over this lately, and me and you have to have a powwow too, because I have this new foot issue that's popped up. Had to miss a run today. Had to cut my long run short Saturday. We don't need to get into that today, but I started thinking about super shoes, stack height, and the availability it allows us in our training, because I can tell you what, if I go for a long run in my Alpha Flies or I go for a long run in some stripped down shoe, my legs will feel very different after those runs. Same pace, same effort. One is saving the legs. One is not saving the legs as much. Even let's say a Speed Goat 5 on the roads, which yes, I'll do once in a while because it's a good road shoe too, if I'm being honest, versus a super shoe. The opportunity for purposeful impact to have a low stack height shoe in training. You know what? I'm going to go pound the cement or the concrete. Sorry, Jack Bauer. I'm going to go pound the concrete in a minimalist shoe, not saying a true minimalist shoe, but like is there benefit to that so that in the last half of your marathon, when you are wearing your Alpha Flies, are you so structure resistant that it helps? Does it make sense to go on the trails in your Innovates once in a while, even though it's not going to help you run your best trail run that day? Is taking damage purposefully, because we're running on pillows these days. Every shoe is a damn cloud, and that's cool and all, and it keeps us available and it helps us work our engine. But the other side of the coin is the structure, and so I have this I'm so curious about that side of it. Do you ever waffle over that? Think about all that?
Yeah. When I build out a training plan, and for certain athletes, we even specify this is a cushion shoe day. This is a beating day. Like we're out here to take a beating and run with a natural foot strike. Yeah. There's nothing natural about an Alpha Fly foot strike. Not one bit. And that's okay for its purpose. But yes, I think about that a lot. And I've been trying to come up with what is my best sustainable pattern of being ready for everything I want to be ready for. And part of that is, what intensities am I doing on which terrains, and what shoe type are you wearing for which intensities, in order to be available as often as possible, but be durable for everything possible. Yeah. Is that convoluted enough for you?
Well, yeah, but
without answering anything yet?
Well, it poses the question, if you're worried about structural integrity and durability, you could argue that you should go wear your minimalist ultras for quality days and then go put on your Alpha Flies for recovery days and rinse and repeat that cycle, which would make no sense by performance standards. But if the goal is to take damage and adapt to that damage, and then on race day you can wear your pillows again, right? Because you're just going to float. I'm not saying any of you should do this, nor am I, but it's just something interesting to think about when you talk about taking damage. The purpose of training is two things: structural integrity and aerobic development, right? And one way to create structural integrity is to create more damage. So it's just
yes,
kind of messing with me. That's all. Something to think about.
So you want to hear my I just did an interview with the Rock's Life, Greg Williams.
Yeah.
Did a podcast with him. And one of the things I talked about, because High Rocks is fascinating to me, is that people speak in absolutes on how the best ways to train for High Rocks are. And several times throughout that podcast, I found myself saying, my feelings on this have evolved in the last year.
Sure.
And I'm going to answer you about how I feel right now, but they're probably going to be different next year at this point, because the sport is not figured out yet, and what works now may only work because of what your prior training was. And as soon as the next stage is done, it fixes problems. Where running's pretty linear in terms of what the next logical step is, and High Rocks is less so, depending on what skills you bring to the sport and what you accomplish and what you do later. Anyway, so I'm going to answer this question in that same light. My current feelings on how someone like me, who wants to be able to run flat and fast sporadically. An occasional mile or 5K, let's be able to run fast, but be able to handle trail and mountain ultras and hybrid stuff in between, but basically be able to run the gauntlet of the distances, but have short and fast, have long and grindy, and be able to do compromise stuff. Here's what I think in this timestamp, how to approach it.
Okay.
Long, easy stuff should be in the most cushioned shoes you can find.
Okay. Listening.
We're trying to get the body working for as long as possible and back to work again as soon as possible.
Well, and
The
just
long,
to
easy
piggyback
stuff.
that, we're looking to work aerobically
Okay.
while taking minimal damage structurally. So
Correct.
A pillow would make sense for that day. Yes, I agree.
Yes. For my fastest work, I don't care what that is in someone's schedule, my fastest work will be my shortest interval. And it will be done in more minimal shoes on hard surfaces.
Okay.
So if I'm going to run fast anyway, I might as well combine it with the skill of running great form and powering well and driving well. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well do it in shorter intervals so I can do more of them and get more skill work in, and do it in lighter shoes and less substantial shoes. Maybe not even super shoes, so that I can work on the pure biomechanics of running well and hitting the ground and taking minuscule impact several hard times throughout it, meaning like only like 30 to 70 seconds or 90 seconds of work. So I'm not trashing my legs, but do it like 10 or 20 times and accumulate some pounding on that day,
So quarter mile
but
repeats,
not in huge duration.
or like 60-60
that kind of
intervals or something. What would be a shoe choice for that day? Give us some examples.
A traditional racing shoe. An Adidas Adios Not Pro. You could even go like a Takumi Sen, where it's that in between. A Saucony Sinister, a Kinvara.
Kinvar is a good one. No,
You could
another
even-
one.
Yeah.
I actually feel the Vaporfly fits that bill better than others as well. Stiff enough.
I was going to say any sort of super shoe that is rocker based, that is not launch based. It's tippy. It's firm in the forefoot, something that's going to make you run on your forefoot and engage your stride rather than the alpha that's going to let you just bounce off the ground. I don't want that. I want to have to drive my legs and self power.
Okay, I agree.
For my longer, grindier stuff, I think that's the time to either do it uphill on the treadmill and take no impact and make it all engine and muscular, or take it a little bit more minimal on the trails. Take a little bit of pounding. You're on terrain. You're going to have to change up your stride enough that I'd rather do it long. You can fake a stride for those quarter mile repeats. You can't fake them for 3 to 6 minute intervals. So that type of stuff, my threshold work is either uphill or on terrain. And on that day, if it's uphill, you're not taking a pounding, which could be balanced out by a pounding day. But if it's off-road, I don't wear super shoes for those. So I've been doing a lot of those too, uphill and terrain. I haven't been doing the short, fast stuff. I haven't been doing incredible long stuff because I couldn't. I've kind of been alternating between uphill 3 to 15 minute intervals and off-road grindy stuff. And I've been wearing a lot of the VJ Lightspeed.
Good shoe.
And if not that, the Adidas Agravix Terex Speed, which both are kind of stiff, firm shoes with not a big stack height.
It's an interesting balancing act of pulling the strings of like, I didn't expect our conversation to go this direction, by the way, about like shoes in particular, but it's somehow we got here. Shocker.
Got here.
Is you want to take minimal impact at times so you can maximize your aerobic output, but then again, you need to take damage at times so you're structurally durable. And my current training pattern, I think I'm getting it right, and I've talked about this before my half marathon. I talked about this like in prep for the 5K. Like, for example, last week I ripped mile repeats on the track, followed by some quarters, 4:54, 4:52, 4:49. 3 minutes rest, and then I hit some quarters, roughly 66 seconds. Harder, quick stuff. Then on Friday, I hit a 3-2 float uphill for an hour at 15%. 3 minutes on, 2 minutes float. Worked really hard in that one. I went way past threshold. Doesn't even matter. I was committed, and it took me, right? I was in the 180s at the end of these hard pushes. I'm getting to a point here. Everything else in between was done on pillowy Cliftons was my recovery work. I did my mile repeats in Vaporflies and even ripped the quarters in spikes just to see how they felt. And then I had this big session, 85 minutes on Friday. My engine was worked. It was a great session. And there's another point I want to make after this. But point being, then I went out to run on Saturday morning after a big Friday uphill session, and guess what? My legs were completely there and 1,000% available. It was like I didn't even do a quality session the day before. I might as well have just done a recovery run. I would have felt the exact same way, which would have allowed me to extend out my time on feet. Granted, my foot started to hurt, which is another thing I said we don't need to chat about. But what I'm getting at is the waffling between like, okay, is minimizing impact a hack to build your aerobic output? Or is it potentially setting you up for frustration if I randomly jump into a trail race in a week or two? It's that balancing act, right? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think that the advent of the super shoe made everyone feel really great. And then you realize I can do more in it, and that's great. But then it started to become a crutch where you feel like you can't do it without.
Right.
I think you still need to be able to do it without. I think you need to be able to know that you can go out and run fast stuff without a super shoe, which is why I think those short, fast intervals are important. Because you can do that just as well barefoot. Like a 30-second sprint, you can do just as well barefoot as you can in Vaporflies. Every bit as well. But one of them is going to tax your legs a whole lot more. And leave you knowing I can run fast. However, now I'm not saying go run it barefoot, just being dramatic here. Whereas the other one might leave you thinking I can't run fast without my Vaporflies. However, they are a great tool. And so I think that they need to be used to amplify your training, not support all of your training. Just amplify them. On the days you were going to take a pounding, still go out and take a pounding. You either choose the shoe to let you take more time on feet or to go faster, but it can't be every day, I don't think. I don't think people should do, if I had to put a percentage on it, I don't think people should be in a super shoe more than at most 25% of your week.
Yeah.
I think that you shouldn't be in a cushiony shoe more than 75% of your week. Maybe 80%. I think there still needs to be somewhere 10, 20, 25% of your week in something less cushiony. Still 80% of the week in something big and cushiony is enough to amplify your training and give you more volume and availability. And that 10 to 20, 25% is still enough to keep you resistant to things, especially if you use it on something fast. That amplifies it as well. You can amplify your damage by doing it fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, what are the hacks then? Let's talk about fixing
Let's
this.
talk hacks.
Talking about like creating structural integrity. You weren't prepared for all the mountain running because you haven't been doing it, right?
I'm semi-prepared.
Okay. Explain.
I was able to do it. It just beat me up towards the end. I'd get a descent or two, and the third one I was trashed for. Or I'd get, like the first run, I had 2,200 feet of descending. I was good for about 1,500, and then I really started to wear it. 1,500 feet of technical, hardish descending is pretty good, but it's certainly not great for a mountain runner. I need more than that. But for where I was in my training, it was great. But my quads were still the limiter. So I was semi-prepared, but I wasn't fully prepared.
And then, of course, like what the damage does on the descending makes you much less available for the next climb, which affects your ability to put out power. And then, you can't staunch the bleeding at that point. So, all right, so the hacks. I think we need to talk about two things, and I think you're gonna agree with me on these. Maybe have extras to add in, but we got to talk about the weight room, and we have to talk about whether you're a road runner or a trail runner. We need to talk about descending, no matter what, no matter who you are. Talking about taking extra impact that flat terrain can't provide. It's like if you're going to cover your bases and create an insurance policy on whatever race you're going to have coming up, making sure that lower body strength work isn't missed and finding a way to take eccentric damage while running, whether it's on a cement downhill that you have available in your city or neighborhood, or it's getting on the trails for a long run. I prescribe a workout that people have just been loving lately, the uphill downhill 400s on concrete. You take a hill, and I don't care, 5-10% grade, doesn't really matter to me. We're running up at 400 meters, resting, running down at 400 meters, and we're rinsing and repeating. Things like that is what I'm outlining. You can even get creative with quality sessions versus just slogging, on a trail. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you have something to add? We're not talking details yet, but what do you think about weight room and then descent work, no matter what, to bulletproof even your flat running? Where are you at with that?
Well, I guess umbrella statement about weightlifting. I believe history has shown us that you can run really well with or without weight training. However, you need to get to the point of, some people don't like the term bulletproofing, and I get that, but you need to get to the point of as bulletproof as possible to withstand the demands of your competition, one way or the other. And so the more you lift, generally, the less you have to get creative with your running to beat your legs up and find that durability. The less you lift, the more you have to do that. So someone who runs 120 miles per week in the mountains has to do preventative lifting. Mm-hmm. Someone who runs 20 miles a week and doesn't have mountains has to do performance-based lifting as well as preventative. That's my stance on that. So I'm a believer in strength training. I'm a believer that you can become mountain and ultra ready partially through the weight room. If you're not doing that, then you have to do the other side of the coin, which is find every tip and trick to trash your legs dynamically and holistically on terrain to make up for the fact that you're not doing it in the weight room. So both will work, but both take creativity.
Where am I getting my damage, and how much of it am I getting, right? And if you're
Correct.
if you're one of those that's, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, because I'm doing a lot of this right now. You're heading out your door, you're running one of the same 6 stupid loops you're so sick of because it's all you got in your neighborhood, and they're flat and uninspiring. If you're one of those, right, great, fine. But like, where are you really improving your resistance to impact for when it's going to matter in later stages of races? I don't know where I'm getting it right now, other than either choosing a lower stack shoe or then my very purposeful strength work. If you're somebody who lives at the base of a ski hill and every day, like Scott Lerg is doing now, and he's going out and just running uphill and running downhill, very, very, very different. And it doesn't matter if you're in a cushioned or a minimal shoe, you're going to take plenty of impact going downhill. That it's going to be the bulk of your resistance prevention. So what do you mean? And of course I have thoughts on all this, but I just like kicking to you first. What do you mean? What did you say? Supplementary lifting for the guy who's running 100 miles a week in the mountains versus, let's call it purposeful lifting for the girl who's running 20 miles a week out her front door. Like, what would be the difference there? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I think about someone like Noel Medina. Why did I say Noel Medina? Miguel Medina.
Who's Noel
Medina? Great athlete as well. But Miguel Medina.
Who is Noel? Is he he's a U.S. track athlete, right?
No, Noel Medina runs OCR. He does Savage Race,
Medina.
Does that kind of thing.
All right. Well, whatever. Continue. Shout
Either
out
way,
Noel.
Miguel Medina, who we've had on this podcast, is he talked about his journey where he ran 100 miles. He made sure he hit 100 miles in the mountains every single week leading up to the Ouray 100-mile race. And he was getting tens of thousands of feet of vert every single week. He doesn't have to do weighted step-ups. He doesn't have to do eccentric lifting, where he's isolating muscles that are going to be needing to be able to take eccentric loading or power him uphill, because he's doing basically like the extreme version of German volume training, but through running.
Yeah.
He's getting all of his calf, quad, hip extension and powering by doing 20 to 30,000 feet of vert every single week in 100 miles in the mountains, up steep grade, coming down that steep grade. What he would have to do with his strength training, or should do, is preventative strength training. things that are going to keep him healthy and able to handle all the purposeful work he's doing in the mountains. Things that are going to balance out the work, keep him pliable, keep him resilient, keep him on his feet. Whereas you or I, who our biggest hill, the biggest hill I have to get to the top if I'm running moderately hard is 3.5 to 4 minutes. My biggest hill within 60-minute drive of my house. In fact, I have to go 3.5 hours to find anything bigger than that. Well, that's not quite going to cut it. You can do a heck of a lot of those, but we still have to be doing things in the weight room that require ultra demands of our body, but through heavy load and explosion. Eccentric lifting, actual plyo work, things that we miss out on the running volume and impact front, we then will build performance style in the weight room. Miguel didn't need performance lifting. He needed preventative maintenance. We would need to add more in because we can't run 100 miles in the mountains. We don't have mountains.
Yeah, so you're maybe outlining for the very high volume, high impact athlete who's already taken a bunch of it, the piddly stuff, maybe more finite movements to bulletproof the hips and the ankles and the knees. And, of course, maybe some full range of motion, let's say Bulgarian split squats, but maybe you can just go lighter on them. Just make sure we're working full range. We're not looking to completely exhaust ourselves in the gym because the demand outside is so high. And then you look at the Kirk DeWindt who runs 40 to 50 miles a week, a lot of it out my door right now. I need to go get myself under heavy load, attempt failure, and just take a lot of structural damage in those sessions to offset my lack of descending or mountains, right? Simple as that, sort of.
Yeah. A high-volume athlete doesn't need high-volume reps for performance. Miguel, in that, could probably never do more than 3 to 5 reps on anything and not go to failure ever and perform at his absolute peak. When I'm training for my ultras, I'm doing my leg builder workouts where I'm going to accumulate 550 walking lunges. He doesn't need 550 walking lunges because he has 5,500 feet of vert in his backyard to go use.
Right.
So we don't need the same things, but either way, we have to arrive to race day with our legs fully and holistically fit and resilient. So yeah, we're not giving you full specifics here, but understanding that idea that if you're on either end of the pole, you're doing opposite things in the weight room to some extent. Mm-hmm. And then as you get closer to the middle, you get to do a little bit more of, oh, my camera just went. I've got to hold it up again. Otherwise it's going to move with me. As you get more towards the middle, you get to do just more of that well-rounded work where you do get some mountain volume. You just do get some weight room work. You're not trashing yourself in the weight room and you're not fully trashing yourself on the mountain, but you get to do a little bit of everything.
Yep. I agree with all of that.
Okay.
Other side of the coin, the descending side of the coin. I believe, and I can take the, I could heed my own advice right now, that if, yes, you look like you want to put words in my mouth, Brakken, you can take this one. I know.
No, I'm just anticipating what you're going to say. Yeah. Because I feel like I know you and I anticipate agreeing fully with you. So do it. Make us proud.
Well, it's if you are not descending purposefully in training, you're leaving two things on the table. Yes, this is for a road runner. Yes, this is for a trail runner. And yes, descending could mean a 5% grade or a 40% grade. It could mean a gradual downhill on your river path, which is concrete, bike path, or it could be the top of a summit down to the base on a technical trail. It could be any version you want to make this. A descent doesn't need to be scared for your life. It could be 5% on a sidewalk, right? Any of it. Point being, if you are not descending with purpose in your training, you are leaving acclimation to resistance to impact on the table, and you are also leaving overspeed biomechanical work on the table that's free. Gravity does it for you when you're running downhill. You just got to get your legs to keep up with yourself, which will translate to flat and fast. So I believe, and when I've had trail races, I've done a great job of getting out there, right? Now I have a 5K. I'm looking to run for 15 minutes, and I'm justifying not taking that damage. But even I know, and deep down, I need to make that hour or 5-minute drive to the trails to do that at least every 2 weeks, and I'm not. But point being, I think it's so vitally important for those two things. over speed training and then taking damage and then adapting to that. Is that what you expected me to say?
Yeah, you're about purposeful downhill work. And I'm about that as well. And I look at the downhill speed, maybe not speed, intensity. Let's say intensity. Downhill intensity, I look at like strength training.
100%.
If you are Miguel and you're getting, let's just say 30 or 40,000 feet, that's crazy amount. Let's just stick with something reasonable that I know he could average, 20,000 feet of vert in a week.
Okay.
If you're running 10 to 20,000 feet downhill every week, you don't need to rip downhills all that often because you're accumulating so many hours of descending and you're training for ultras that you're going to have so much resistance to downhill impact built up that you can do a lot of that in kind of that flowy descent style. Just flow the descents. You're going to build it up. Just like the strength training. He doesn't need to build up his uphill running ability per se in the weight room. He has to prevent himself from getting injured in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
But for the flatlander or to the people without access to big hills, just like we have to build purposefully in the weight room, we have to build purposely downhill. If you don't have long descents, you must have hard descents. If you don't have big mountains, you must have hard foot impacts. And that's what we're saying about that 5%. It could be my little local ski hill with 198 feet of vert. It could be that 5% pavement hill. Well, whatever it is, you have to run it hard because that's how you're going to build it up. And then you get your overspeed training benefit as well. Miguel can do flat ground speed work or uphill speed work and balance out his stride because he's got 10 to 20,000 feet of descending in him. If we get 2,000 feet of descending, it's going to have to be pretty purposeful.
Yeah.
If you can crank downhill for 2,000 feet, you can flow downhill for 4,000 or 5,000 feet, maybe even 6,000 feet. I believe that very intensely to the core of my being. If you can rip downhill, you can go 3 to 4 times that distance under control. Your body's prepared to handle that.
Yeah. Two things I sort of want to jump on that with. One, for those on like our running public training plan, you'll see like Hunt and Vert, for example, on a Thursday. We're a big fan of the midweek long run Hunt and Vert. On those days, like for example, that's maybe our one gray zone run of the week, right? If we're going to have one, it would be there where the heart rate might spike a little on a climb or, and that's okay. I actually firmly believe if you're going to have a gray zone run, vert is the way to kind of, justify it. But what I'm saying is on that run, if you're not on the treadmill, and a lot of us flatlanders need to rely on the treadmill to chase vert, and that is what it is. But if you're able to get on real terrain, those are such good opportunities. And your long runs that aren't quality, a traditional long run. Just I'm going to go get my time on feet, keep it recovery, maybe progress the back half. I don't know. But both of those opportunities are climb comfortably, enjoy yourself, conversational effort. But as soon as the first hill hits in your route, whether it's in a city on cement or it's on the trails, I'm going downhill, business time. And I may rip, it might be 30 meters in your stupid neighborhood where that hill is, but you open it up and pound down it. Then you go back to just sort of steady running. And then you summit a climb on your trail and you notice it's going down. It's like, what is that going to do? First of all, it's not going to spike your heart rate too much because you're going downhill, not compared to uphill. And then 2, you're going to get these little seedings of damage, which I think are very important. So like on that midweek long run and then a traditional long run, it's like, okay, I'm just going to run pretty easy, steady. And then when I see something that's downhill, rip. That's, I think, sort of a good way to layer it in to start. I know it can be hard to access the right terrain for that, but that's one way to do it. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, I do. That's the no downhill left behind workout.
Yeah.
You run your run as is, but every time you see a downhill, you use it purposefully. You hear it in the running world. People like to say slow feet don't eat, which I like that phrase. But what it also applies to is downhills. The less downhill you have available to you, the less you have the luxury of cultivating bad habits. I believe that when you are running downhill, if you are not trying to run fast that day, you still must have quick feet. I think that you are not allowed to cultivate slow feet downhill as an off-road runner. I'm not talking about a marathoner, not talking about track runner. In this specific instance, we're talking about downhill impact. I think that cultivating quick feet is really, really necessary.
Yeah.
And so Miguel out there running 10 to 20,000 feet, these are quick, light steps. Me here running 1,000 to 2,000 feet, these are quick, heavy steps.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hit the ground fast. He's trying to hit the ground light. But we're both trying to move our feet quickly. We get into trouble with pounding. There is dangerous pounding downhill and there is appropriate pounding. And I think it's entirely based around how fast your feet are moving. If your feet are moving fast, you are most likely landing close to underneath yourself with your center of gravity, and you are structurally sound. When your feet start to slow, even if you're trying to run soft and gentle, your legs are hitting the ground way more in front of you than they should be. And now all this force gets driven down through your quads to the top of your knee, front of your shins, and it's bad impact. It's not very helpful for races, but it's the kind of thing that leads to tendonitis or tendinopathy or issues with impact. Firm, planted, fast pounding is good.
Yeah.
Long, extended, slow is bad when you're talking downhill.
Yeah, and the thing about long, extended, slow downhill, and the steeper the grades, the more prevalent this is if you're shuffling or you're being slow, you pretty much take your hips out of the equation, which we want adaptation in the hips, and you just work the distal end of your quads and like your knee, and it takes so much stress there. So the end of your quads kind of go, and you're not getting any benefit from like your powerhouse, which would be your hips. And your hips, yes, are the powerhouse. Running uphill, downhill, flat, I don't care. Powerhouse, right? Whereas when you open it up, now you're going to get that great impact on the quads, but it's going to be sort of all the way through the chain, we'll call it, from the knee all the way up to the hip flexor. It's going to distribute that impact more from just the distal end of your quad. It's going to distribute all the way up, and then your hips get the pounding too. Your hips have to even generate power going downhill, so you can scuttle down the hill and baby it, and then you're going to get that big burn in the end of your quads and the sort of points of your knees, and you're going to get some sort of satisfaction out of that. Or you open it up, it distributes the impact all the way through the quad, and then now your hips are taking it as well, and it's just like they're not even on the same playing field as far as the benefit from, right? Like they're just not. And I know some people's skill level isn't meant, like they're just not skillful enough to run downhill on some terrain with that sort of purpose. But that person, if you're slow in quotes, if you're scared, and even if you live in the mountains, you're the person who should go into town and find that access road that goes up somewhere and run that instead of the technical trail. Or like find that cement or concrete descent. Remember when you and I hit a workout? I was smoked from that. They were like 12-minute threshold intervals, and we ripped downhill. What was that? A 250-foot concrete hill at 15% grade? Would you say?
It's about 400 meters long, maybe 600, and it was just pavement.
Brutal.
It was so hard.
And I was wrecked. And you know what happened 3 weeks later? I went and ran a 50K with like 6,000 feet of gain. And after smacking that descent like that with you so hard, I had handled that 50K with way more gain on trail. Like I was bulletproof, man. It couldn't hurt me. Are you kidding me? Not compared to what the cement does. And I think a lot of times we avoid the cement. Like that's not glorified as a trail runner, which half of our listeners are. You get to the trails. I would argue once every 10 days, no, suck it up and go run like residential concrete downhills. This is a tangent now, but you get what I'm getting at with this.
Absolutely. I believe slow contractions need to be saved for the weight room. A slow descent into a squat, a slow return to the ground in the deadlift. Yes. Do not allow slow contractions to happen downhill. The longer your quad is engaged for on a descending stride, the more you're doing something to it that you don't want to be doing.
Yeah.
We want the fastest contraction possible on descending, even if these are light little mincing shuffle steps. That's the way you save your legs and take appropriate damage. The long contraction downhill screams injury to me. You are stressing things that are not designed to be stressed at the angle they're being stressed at if you have a long downhill contraction. So slow contractions in lifting on eccentrically, fast contractions downhill. That's how you can pound a downhill and stay healthy. And you don't have to do this often. We're talking probably every 2 weeks, maybe every 10 days. I am not hammering pavement hills every week. That's just not smart. Yeah. You have to give yourself time to recover. And science says you have about 20 days in between descents. Use that. Use it to do other types of descending. But you must be moving quick-footed. And I believe the two best things, and I've tested this out with a lot of people, myself included, probably 6 different ultra athletes this year that I work with who needed to get better at descending, and they just claim they have slow feet or whatever. The single best thing I found is down stair running, because you have to get better with that foot-eye connection. And eventually you get to the point where you can flow a stair quickly. It doesn't feel like you ever will your first session. But over time, suddenly, every single one of them says, hey, I just found myself moving quickly down the stairs today. And as soon as you can do that, you can run technical terrain fast. And then the other one's jump roping. You are so clumsy at first, but both of those require you to get your foot off the ground rhythmically. And as soon as you can do something rhythmically, you can do it arrhythmically. So that is for those people that say, I can't run quickly downhill, I have to plod. You don't. You can still take short steps, but you have to be fast off your feet. Start with stairs. You can't fake a stair, and it will force you into a rhythm.
Yeah, if you start that for your first time on concrete stairs, be prepared for your calves to be more sore than they've ever been in your entire life as well. That's always a nice little benefit. The way that eccentrically loads, because you have to land on your toe and then heel second, versus on a real trail, you land still like, heel to toe, we'll call it. On the stairs, it's kind of the opposite, right? You almost have to prance on your toes and then come down on your heel if it's done well. And oh my God, you want to talk about calves being messed up? Whew. It's a good one for that.
And if it's done poorly, it really magnifies that slow contraction that you're doing. Oh, my camera did it again. If you go slow downstairs, that toe to heel thing is laborious and your legs start to really feel bad. You have to get to the point where you can tap, 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 tap down the stairs to avoid that bad kind of reverse rocker effect. And so it teaches you and forces you to keep your feet moving with momentum, despite taking very short steps. You can become a quick stair descender, not skipping 2 stairs at a time. And as soon as you can do that, you can run any type of mountain you want. But it might take 7 or 8 sessions.
Yeah, and it's a skill thing as much as a fitness thing, and that's the tricky thing.
Yes.
We did end up focusing a lot on descending today, which I didn't know if that's what we were going to do here. Just so we don't miss anything, were there any other here's some noise outside my house. Was there any other aha moments just in your training these last few weeks in regards to taking damage from workouts, lessons learned recently as you're ramping up and recommitting pretty heavy to your training? Anything else other than what we've covered?
Well, I think I want to reiterate that most people should be doing something short and fast on flat, hard terrain each week. Just maybe even a minimum effective dose, something. It can be strides for most people or mechanical speed sessions, something short and quick. But I think the key here is that whatever the races you're going to be doing, ultra, track, trail, mountain, whatever, you have a component of them every week that maintains what you're doing. And then as you get closer to your goal race, the main mover of the week becomes that terrain, if possible. So you always stay in touch with being able to handle the impact specifically of the terrain you're going to be doing, and then you just sharpen it as you get closer rather than having to build the skill and the resistance and the volume simultaneously. We want the skill always there, the impact mostly there, and then we just switch the volume of it as we get closer. I believe that's the perfect world for people who want to race multiple terrains.
Yeah, and I could add this as a PSA to literally any topic that we are talking about, but it's a blanket statement cover all. And that is, don't forget what got you there. Meaning, if you have a newfound focus on something to improve a skill, let's say durability or ramping up your high rocks training or whatever, don't forget about what helped you create the fitness you already have. So don't sacrifice your threshold run which has helped propel your fitness immensely, to go pound downhills every week, for example. Like, don't let go of the pieces that have still worked for you, right? And I'm trying to remind myself of that with this 5K pursuit. I did 60 minutes of a float style workout last week. Is that really 5K training? Well beyond, but I know that's what got me to a position to potentially have a good race. I don't want to let go of that, for example. And so, again, you could literally take any topic and add this as a caveat, but I think if you're going to work a specific skill, just try not to do a 180 completely and then let go of the other things that you know work for you and have made you successful. Not that even needed to be said, but for some reason I felt like I should say that if people are looking at, implementing new training strategies.
Yeah. Well, if you don't use it to some extent, you do lose access to it. And eventually you either erode your fitness or you erode your skill set. And part of that skill is the impact resistance. And I think in the ultra world, it's talked about a lot. But pivoting between even mid-distance or long-distance terrains, people jumping on a track from the 5K road to the 5K track, it's not the same impact. It's not the same demands. Someone the other day was like, should I spike up for this 5K tracksmith I'm going to do? Like, well, have you wore spikes? You got to start, I would say, at least 4 weeks out in spikes if you've not run in spikes in a long time. If you haven't, you're not ready for that impact. Spikes might be faster, but they're going to be slower for you. You're going to be faster for a mile. You're going to fatigue for a mile, and you're going to be significantly reduced for your final mile because you're not ready for the impact, the specific type of impact that a track spike causes. And it's the same thing with super shoes. You're going to be better right up into the point where your calves or quads or whatever it is, the style of shoe that you use stresses, and then you're going to cramp.
Yep.
Like, they're great until they're not, and that's how most new races are. Feels great right up into the point where you're not prepared for that particular demand. And so identifying that ahead of time is everything.
Busted out my spikes for the first time last week, 4.5 weeks out. The magic little sweet spot there. I'm following your advice. Didn't even know it. Man.
You're in that window.
Do you ever wear spikes anymore? God, you put them on and your shoe feels like part of your foot, right? And you're like, whoa, this is different. I'm so connected to the ground and the earth, which I'm not anymore with the stack height shoes. It's a very interesting feeling. I really enjoyed it, to be honest. You feel really good out of the gates. And then as the rep wears on, you start to notice the foot hitting the ground and how your body's reacting to it. Because the first 200 meters are free. And then suddenly you're like, okay.
You run so clean.
But then you get stripped down pretty quick to your true form. I'm noticing it. I'm going to use them again tomorrow for some 200s at the end of I think I'm going to do 8x800 and then finish with 8x200. And I'm going to spike up for those as well. So maybe I won't take much damage, but spike running's fun, dude.
It's so fun. So I bought these right here, these Hoka spikes, right before I did that 800 meter race indoor.
Right. Yeah.
In January. And I hadn't worn spikes, so I bought a long distance pair of spikes to just give me a little bit extra underneath me. And I put those on for the first time in several years. They were brand new, but the first time I've wore spikes in several years. And I got on the track at the end of my warm up and did my first stride and just thought, I have never felt faster. That fast connected pop off the track in a pair of spikes is unparalleled. And by the end of the race, I knew I don't even think I should wear these for a full mile right now. I would need 2 more weeks of doing some workouts in these before I could even run 4.5 minutes in this shoe without it stressing me to a level it shouldn't stress me. No way could I take them for a 5K currently. So it was a great reminder of how fast you feel in very, very minimal plated shoes. and how destructive they are as soon as you can't run clean. They amplify you when you're clean, and they destroy you when you're not clean.
Yeah, I have the Dragonflies, the Nike Dragonflies, which you'll see the pros wearing. Like you look at the Olympics coming up, and most of the guys in the 1500 and 5K are going to be wearing the Dragonflies if they're Nike athletes. Yeah, 1500, 5K, probably the Dragonfly, right?
I put on a pair of those at the store, thinking I was going to get those. And I didn't know what a super spike would feel like. And it was just like a great pair of spikes amplified a little bit. It's just a slight bit of like heel support, a slight, like not a full rock, but like a platform to launch off of. And it felt so good. And I also knew my stride can't sustain that all the way through a race right now. So I don't belong in them yet.
They help you. What I found with them when I get tired is it assists in turnover, but it doesn't assist in launch. So like towards the last 50 meters of my 400-meter reps last week, like my stride was shortening, but I could access a really quick turnover. It wants you to just spin, right? But like a thing like the Vapor Alpha actually helps you extend when you're tired and keep your stride length. Right. It's very interesting. They're so different. I don't know if I'll spike up for the race. I'm just playing around with the idea, but I don't know how we got on that.
They're fun.
They are fun. All right, should we put a pin in this thing, Brakken? Know what I would like to do actually, and I should probably ask you off mic, but now I'm gonna ask you on mic. Is we haven't done a strength training like a strength training when durability is the purpose episode. We haven't done one like that specifically. We just only teased it a little today. Maybe we need to dive into that. We'll see if some listeners give us some feedback and if they're interested in how to create impact in the gym or resistance to impact and durability. We haven't done that in years, so we might want to. Okay,
let's do it.
I don't know. Let's see if people slide into our DMs and beg for it. It's good to have you back. I have a low battery warning. It says your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged into a power outlet. So that's our sign.
You live life crazy.
I didn't know
I can't believe you don't just keep that baby plugged in.
The cord, I guess I unplugged it for this one. So
I can't hang with you. That's too wild for me.
I am out of control. My hair's down today. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Yeah, we'll see you later this week.
See ya.